Okay, Deb. I'll start the recording. Off we go. You're on mute.
This is exciting. Okay, I've got some good questions here for today. So if anybody,
You want to frame the day?
yeah, it's just what I was about to do.
Okay, sorry.
If anybody didn't join us last week, this is kind of a continuation. I talked with Tantra last week about what her experience of coming into, I guess I'm going to call it human form, her experience of embodying as a human consciousness. And then we had several questions around that. This week, I want to start with exploring what you think activated this current drive towards human consciousness. It seems to me, well, I definitely remember that, when we met in the late 80s, there had already begun to be a drive, a lot of metaphysical information getting out. The last couple of decades had been the 60s movements, all kinds of information from the East coming to the West, like about mindfulness, meditation, and a lot of other things. And just, I could name a whole bunch of markers. But what do you think activated that this time?
This time in what manner?
What do you mean in what manner?
I mean, this time like right now, or this time that we've been living in?
This time, like what I can remember in my lifetime.
Okay.
And
Okay.
since yours in my association, for sure.
Okay.
Something had driven it. We can look back in time, what, Jesus, Buddha, who knows before that, who and what was driving awakening consciousness, but certainly since people like Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, then however many, then this period of time, it seems to have been really concentrated since about the 60s.
So I'm going to answer from what I've observed, not from what I know, because each of us knows only from the quadrant of reality that we come from.
Mm.
So I can also say what I know from the quadrant of reality I come from,
Please.
But it doesn't apply to everybody.
Okay.
Is the point I want to make. What I observed, however, because I started doing what I do about 19, where the public knew I was present, I guess you would say, where people knew I was around. And so there seemed to be two conversations. One conversation was about ascension, and there was no conversation, and one conversation about transformation. Those two things were there. There wasn't really any conversation about embodiment. And then I had an event. And the event I had was, I think I was about 23, maybe. I was a heavy drinker, among other things. It was quite wild. And I'd had an all-night party, and I had woken up the bathroom in the tub and the water was full of my blood. I had been born with a hole in my stomach, and I had overdrank, and I had developed an ulcer around the inside and outside of my stomach, both. And they took me to the emergency room, and my one of my friends took me to the emergency room, my housemate. And then they told me they were going to have to operate on my stomach, and I told them I didn't want that. And they said, well, the only other answer is to lay flat on your back in bed for almost 6 weeks and don't move, except to very carefully go to the bathroom. I don't think you've heard this story. I just realized that. Yeah, so Maureen took me back to my mom's house, and you might want to stay on mute. And so I was laying in bed, and like I said, I already had a reputation. And I woke up in my long sleep, and there were quite a few people in my bedroom. standing around my bed. And it was when the whole ascension thing was going on, about that there would be those of us that came and ascended, and then we come back and provide information for people. So they were very excited because they felt that I was in an ascension process, and that they couldn't wait for me to go out and come back and give them the information. And I told them to get the H out of my room, that I had no interest in ascending, that what I was interested in was embodying what a human being was actually designed to be. So I think it was a little ahead of my time. And then a few of us were a little ahead of our time. People started paying attention, not to ascension, but to collective community. Barbara Marx Hubbard, Joan, I can't remember her last name, Jean Houston, who's the other one I spent time with, in Finn Horn, who wrote about the stages from God, Sears clear as a bell. She wrote a book about the stages of the human soul, from tribe to individual to embodiment, and we were in embodiment. You'll remember her name if I remember it. So I felt like there was this movement of this place being a place of embodiment that just had not existed before. Even Jesus said, when you die, you'll go to the mansion in heaven. So there was a cosmological belief systems and operations, karma, where the only reason we come to this beautiful, extraordinary, fantastic planet is to work out our sins. It seemed in error. It seemed that the earth herself and the majesty of her capacity to create were in a direct conflict with what I was being told, and what a lot of us were being told, actually.
Right.
So we started trying to figure it out ourselves. We kind of lost the obey God thing, and that there was a power that we needed to be okay, and we started to figure out what we were, basically what we were. And I remember it clearly because I started doing free. I think my first paid reading, I was 19 years old, but I've been doing them, almost for fun, maybe a little older. But I remember how sad I was that human beings seem to be locked in a cage of a consciousness that they couldn't seem to be free from. And I remember it. All my 20s was about making the cage as comfortable as possible, because it didn't seem the conditions were right. You were talking about, it didn't seem the conditions were right. It wasn't the people's fault. Of course, everybody was blaming themselves. And then when we got together in the 30s, that when I was in my 30s, then we began to notice that people really did seem to have the capacity to take on this mystery called myself. And then I think that it is just bloom from there. But I want to say something about reality. Realities are entrenched. So the reality you carry as a person, the reality I carry as a person, they're entrenched. They become living fields. They're alive. As collectives, we also carry entrenched living fields. So I was shown 2020 to 2027, 45 years ago, and the existing reality would start to become unentrenched. It would start to break apart. It would start to become chaotic. And there would be a period of time of no mind, because the mind that human beings carried was formulated by what was entrenched. And then somewhere around 2027, the emerging realities that are more connected to embodying life here, not doing time here, but in doing time here to fix our mistakes and cure ourselves of our sin, or suffer sufficiently, that there would be a new paradigm, a new reality would rise that was paradise, where everything operated in love with each other, basically. And boy, I got to tell you, it has showed up in the prophetics like gangbusters. I'm actually going to sit down with about 5 or 6 people, anybody that's interested. And I want each person to take a transcription. We're going to pull all the personal part out. And I'm going to make it an ebook because it is such new news. It is flabbergasting. And it really points to this idea that we can be both immortal and mortal here. And that it probably is why a lot of us came. Now, maybe everybody, now, maybe not every human being, maybe that's not their lineage, but a lot of us actually came here to experience this place because it felt like fun. Hard to believe for a lot of people. No, you need to unmute.
Yep. Felt like fun. Okay, well, before I get to that, it's so interesting to me how I wrote these questions down several days ago. And then there've been so many things that I've come in contact with that have just reinforced that the engagement with these questions, including what I just asked, is really up everywhere. So part of my asking you this question, besides the value of your experience as an individuated being and your observations as, well, a leader in consciousness, that would do, wouldn't it? That would sum you up okay, right?
I certainly have found myself in that place.
Then it just seems to be up everywhere. But I'm interested in getting people accessing their journeys. So I really appreciate how you answered from your point of view. So, because I'm very, very interested in people gaining conscious awareness of this process for themselves, both like what we asked about last week and this week, what I'm asking. And I'm so interested to see it popping up in lots of different domains. So,
and that could include, for those of you on Facebook, that could include writing what you see and what Deb said in the chat, not the chat, the comments.
For me, I think it's really important that we start to pay attention. I think we're moving out of a time when it's look to the leader. You've talked about this for a very long time. And that was, in fact, so did Jesus in his way, according to my understanding, which is not the common understanding of a lot of what Jesus said. But the point is for all of us to be in our standing there. And Barbara Marx Hubbard used the term godlings in the sunlit garden of creation, which I think is perfect. So there was something else I wanted to ask about that. Let me see. Okay, well, while I think of that again, I think there's a point to this, not necessarily a reason the way we typically think of logic and reason. But I found myself just wondering, okay, well, there seems to be this multidimensional drive or push to awaken in consciousness and embody that. I think it's both at the same time.
What both, Deb, if you could?
Awaken in consciousness, and then that embodies.
Yeah.
And people are embodying, and then that awakens consciousness.
Clear. Thank you.
But I found myself saying, well, what's the point? Not like a cynical or depressed kind of what's the point? But what's the point? Because I noticed when I was thinking about that, listening to the different things that have sparked me this week, that I remembered all how I just automatically got pulled by this. I was also one of the ones that way back when I was a much more individual being and far less individuated, that ascension didn't appeal to me at all. Now at that time, I was much more likely to be a snob about it. Now I can see, okay, great. If ascension is what you're called to, great. That's wonderful. Embodiment and awakened consciousness is what I'm called to. Thank heavens. But I still found myself thinking this week, well, what's the point? Just being drawn to it and answering the call, so to speak, really drove the show for a long time. So that's what my question is. What do you see as the point?
Well, first of all, I want to speak about both your and my life, because both of us got our chance to put our money where our mouth is. Your heart attack and my COVID. We really got to be conscious beings saying, I want to stay. And I want to start there. It's pretty radical, but I want to start there. I was writing out a request for participation in a group. And the question they asked me was kind of why, which is going to get to your answer of your question. Why did I want to participate in the group? Because they're a leading edge group. They're leading edge. They're paying attention in the unknown. They're paying attention in I don't know, which is a very important point of being able to leave one reality and be in limbo to get to the next one, to have it formulate in your consciousness. And my answer was, when I had COVID, I had to confront dying, and the body couldn't seem to live. It couldn't seem to do the things it needed to do to live. And I could feel the very plug in to the life force entered the body leaving. And I got on this my individuated aspect, really got on the side of wanting to be here. And people misunderstand me when I say I don't want to die, but it's a much more existential question than a personality. What I didn't expect was reality as I know it, not like inside me, not outside me. How I operated in reality began to completely dismantle, just come inside me. Outside, I looked just the same, but inside me, it all began to dismantle. And I had an experience that won't go away. And the experience was, somehow it burned out all the trauma memory in my body, because trauma kills. And it did it over time, but it just burned out all the trauma memory. And I got to experience spirit in the flesh, the spirit of life in the flesh. And I still am. And that's the point. But the thing is that so few, I remember, and you know this because you've heard me say it, like I remember the higher self of me would go like, Jesus Christ, do you realize that you're only a head, a bobblehead between your ears? Where's the rest of you? I mean, I used to like, where are you? Where is the you of you that just has this talking bobblehead going on all the time? Where's the real you? And the real you is in the body. So embodiment's a literal term. It's not a figurative term. And a lot of people, enough people to be notable, have had experiences of they feel the body different. They feel that like it can embody the spirit of life again, not the spirit of life like medical, the spirit of life like yummy, like life as paradise, as an experiential state. And so that's truly goes back to the prophetics for a minute. Particularly one or two of them that still have me like way more information than we have time for here. But I could really see that whatever that species of human is that still remembers it's in the body still remembers being an immortal nature that really wanted to come here and have a form that it could experience the deep richness of existence in new ways, like senses and textures, and it just really amazed me. And I started using the phrase in the prophetics towards the end, is that I could see the immortal nature, like a toroidal field, literally coming into their mortal coil, like the mortal coil is back that holds the immortal nature. And beyond that, I've begun to see other things, which I won't bring up here, which we're going to write a book called Metabody. But I began to see pieces of the human body that we think are medical and can't explain. And yet I can see they're literally instruments that hold our memory of paradise, the more immortality of enjoying this place and thinking this place is the cat's meow. And I'm watching those little things. I don't know what to call them, glands, organs, nervous systems. I'm watching them take their job back, like literally take their job back to register this sort of, that's why I keep saying, I don't want to die. It's probably, I don't want to die yet, or I don't want to be what die is right now is probably a better term, because I know the frame is the immortal getting a real chance to enjoy, we can call it divine, whatever people want to call it, the Christ consciousness. It has so many names, our spirit, but it is actually, the body is actually waking up functions within itself that lets us register ourselves as that. And I think that was the point. And I think something terrible happened here, probably several something terribles. And this place is a juicy place. I know the Palladian theory is that the gods feed on fear. And that's quite possible. I don't know. We have a lot of conversations about don't be afraid. Your trauma level will shoot to the max. So there's probably a lot of stories that are inside myth that talk about what got aberrated here and how the basic interest that allowed the planet to become this beautiful composition of consciousness that probably was created by her immortality. What we don't realize, Deb, that our planet is actually a sun with a mantle around it. She's a sun. The center of her is fire. She is a sun with a mantle around her. So it's quite possible that she embodied. And that and like you said, it's a both and, it's both happening at the same time. And that the consciousness of her immortality and her mortality and the mortality of conscious beings that don't really individuate into things created this. I think so. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the myths we have. We wouldn't have gods. We wouldn't have these, the conversations point that way is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Because I'm thinking of two things. One is last April. Actually, it started a good bit before that. Was it the previous October? Anyway, when something happened and I just said, oh my God, my heart's broken. And in this plane of existence, we call it, there's a term, broken heart syndrome. Well, I think it's real. And then the medical part of it started last April. And you describe it from your side, and I I wouldn't have minded dying from where I was at the time, but I noticed, well, the body won't do it. How blasted inconvenient. But I don't mean from that depressed state or anything, just the more of the what's next place. Like something was wrong. I don't just mean medically. From that place that had me say my heart's broken, something was wrong. Dreams got interrupted that weren't supposed to get interrupted. But from a place of something was totally fulfilled and I couldn't access the new place, the something.
There.
Then, like I said, I noticed, well, the body it's not done. And I'm really kind of mad about that. So there's been this sorting out. Oh, wow. I'm trying to figure out how to say this. There's been this sorting out. Well, what is there? And I hadn't really connected the body to all our work in consciousness from before. And I hadn't really connected. There's a whole realm. And I've been looking like across what I've studied about human history. And it's mirrored in so many ways. There's just like, a baby develops a certain way. Well, in school, we teach kids a certain way. That's like, first you take these steps, you learn ABC, then you do this. It's layered. And I looked at, human history and noticed it seemed to be layered. I started looking at the myths of the Garden of Eden again. And the separation, wow, I think that's an entry point for fear. You mentioned that. I think that's one of the places where fear is clouding our ability to perceive what's there.
Let me actually re-language that, because I just had 2 days of terror, and but I could analyze it. I have a huge observer nature, so it lets me pay attention to my mortal coil in a pretty lovely way, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same time, there is no not feeling it at the same time.
Right.
And you do that too. And but what I realized, I want to tag onto what you said, and then it's a personal story, but people I'm really forecasting. This is like a prophetic right this second, because I knew what was happening. Like you said, you had no say. The body was going the way it was going, and you were having a conversation about it. But that was exciting because that actually is embodiment. That actually is the activity when the body takes over, regardless of how it's no longer influenced by the human separation from itself. So, but I knew what the terror was. I knew in December 20, I knew for years, I said, just let me get my job done and get out of here. So I was completely organized at every level of my mystical mind and mystical being, that I would leave when my part of the job was done, not the job was done, but my part. And that was December 31st, 2020. No doubt in my mind, 2021. I was clear, I was done. I had created a coherent field. The consciousness of the planet could generate coherent fields on its own with human beings. Now, I restored something people haven't even asked me about, because my partnerships with the planet, not with human beings, but we pulled it off. A bunch of human beings have pulled it off. And even to the point that now we get the opportunity to actually find our geopathic minds restoring, find our electromagnetic consciousness restoring. So it's really, in my world, how I pay attention is an eternal, It's quite potent. Then, isn't it interesting that I had COVID in June, and my body died. It did die. I went all the way down to ground zero. Dr. Chari was with me when I did it. And suddenly I'm in 2021 only as a 2020. No, that was 2020. I can't remember my dates, but yeah, 2021. But suddenly I'm in a, no, I was 2021. So 2021, suddenly I'm in a body that seems to be not going when I have completed my job. And I have said that I wanted to leave and then what was this strange thing about wanting to stay? But it was that limbo you just addressed. The limbo was, and a lot of people are leaving now for this very reason. But it's what that conversation that Julio had yesterday about the capacity of a human being to be in the not yet known. Faith, to be in the not yet known, in terror, because every piece of the structure of consciousness that has held us in the playing field we've been in is simply dismantling. So 3 days ago, a bunch of really strong synchronicities came together, and I had the direct experience that I was starting to be formed. I was in the formation of my I and my body were in the formation of the new reality, or realities, or consciousness. We have to be careful to not make it singular. And it put me in terror. It put me in terror because I was like an embryo that wasn't sure it was going to make the full gestation period. And then last night, today is a very important day for Damanhur, Italy, damanhur.org, if you all want to look it up, you all. And they pay attention to the separation of timelines. One timeline moving towards devolution, simply said, one timeline moving towards evolution. Well, I knew I came in to work for the timeline for evolution, but it's a whole different thing, especially for the people who are healers or, light workers. We're going through huge shifts of, wow, I thought I would get my job done and leave. Not, oh my God, we're part of the new timeline of evolution. Holy Mother, in truth, for me, Holy Mother. And then I had this dream last night. We were given the instruction to do this patterning and to ask for a dream about the separation of timelines. Well, I tell you, I did. I was flabbergasted. I mean, it was so clear and so real and so new. And I woke up with no fear in my body, no anxiety anymore, no nothing. So what you said earlier about layering, I think we have to get used to the layering. One layer comes in like the deep skin in the body. One layer comes in, but it's really raw. It can't be exposed to the sun. It's fragile. It's not fragile. It's tender. It hurts because the next layer is not on, and the next layer is not on. So if, my goodness, if that's not embodiment being experienced, the self-embodying, I don't know what is. And I'm not the only one.
Right. And when you said that, I was reminded of a term I learned in school, high school biology. What is ontology? Ontology and phylogeny. In other words, at some point, the human embryo looks like a little fish or a lizard. And so all kinds of evolutionary states are mirrored in the development of a lot of embryos, a lot of species embryos.
And imagine if the mind was going, oh my God, I'm a fish. A fish can't be fish can't walk. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. And exactly what you're describing is what I was experiencing was, well, as far as I'm concerned, I've completed several jobs. I'm done. And then body says no. And then there's the limbo of, okay, well, what is the job then? I still don't know that I could put words to it for myself.
Yeah, but the job now is simply being alive. It's that thing that happened, and I have my years wrong, 2020, I think, where that godness came to me and said, thank humanity for their service. We'll take it from here.
Yeah.
In other words, the consciousness of human beings searched and stimulated the collective field long enough that the greater forces of creation that created this place and us can return, cannot be active again.
Yeah. Isn't it an amazing thing? It's so simple that the point of activating consciousness and gaining conscious awareness is to revel in being alive. And that can look like a lot of things, of course. There's plenty of causes, even here in the United States, there's plenty of causes in the world, just this planet, that if that's what being alive is for a person, then, there's plenty to do. But just being alive and then investigating what is that.
And the other thing about that, Deb, is last year in the prophetics, the theme that kept showing up was for people to develop healthy emotional palettes. And I actually had my mental perception was that so we made it through the next 5 years. That wasn't what it meant at all. It wasn't until I got into this year that I went, oh my God, was I off? I was off in my interpretation.
Right.
It was that the healthy, it's the registers in the body let us know if we're in paradise or hell. It's the registers in the body.
In the body.
It's the ecstasy and agony on a biofeedback machine measure exactly the same. It's the ability for the body and the mind and the mental mind to perceive ecstasy, which is just intense energy, over agony, which is also intense energy. And when we have something called agony, it's just burning up the trauma base. It's just trauma base. It's just frozen trauma. But on the other side is that trauma burns up, which we feel. Then there's ecstasy. And I think those of us that have had near-death experiences, that because to die is to lose the trauma, is the trauma
That's right.
to lose the trauma. And then the body can regenerate like a new embryonic discovery dynamic.
Yes. See, layers. I'm so fascinated with it's not layers because that's too linear. It's more like concentric circles within.
Yeah, fields within fields within
fields. Fields within fields within fields. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you say more about the aspects of body that are waking up? Because when you were saying that, I remembered, I've been fascinated with mitochondria forever. And I haven't really delved deeply into Greg Braden's work, but I've studied superficially and his ideas about DNA. And I came across an article years back where this man, who was, of course, written off as insane, said he had scientifically discovered that part of the function of human DNA was to literally be a transmission system between us and God. And so that's all what's coming to mind as you talk about aspects of body. Can you say more about your understanding or observation?
So this came out of the prophetics. And the interesting thing about the prophetics is that it all occurs as real in the prophetics. It's not like it's not like painting a picture for somebody to discover a broader experience of their lives. It's like direct communication through my head. So before I say, the thing is that all of us have different interests. My interest in embodiment is just not the embodiment of the immortal personality. That's my interest. That the mortal individuated being can remember its immortal nature. That's my interest. So what I started seeing in the prophetics has a direct relationship with what allows us to perceive our self. So it isn't just the DNA connecting us back into the eternal, which is more general, which is more like there's a lake, let's swim in it. But who am I in the lake? That's my interest. And it all started with Michael talking about that the amygdala is two separate organs, glands, whatever they are, things, that there are two of them. Well, nobody ever told me. And yet when I went and got my COVID shot, I mean, my vaccine, I couldn't explain to people. It wasn't like normal person going getting a vaccine. My amygdala were like, I could only do it metaphorically. They just were saying, well, let's go. We're good to go. No harm. Body's fine. Let's just do this thing. There's a greater purpose than just that jabbed, you know? But I was completely calm. And 4 hours before, I was terrified I was going to be forced into it. Very similar to the dream lesson in the last 2 days. But when I got into the 3 or 4 of the prophetics, literally, I could see in the human body 2, 3 things. And I'm not making anything up about it. I mean, the thing that we have to do now is not try to figure out what the truth is. We have to see if it activates us, if it gives us movement, a movement of consciousness, if our consciousness can move with it. And there are 3 areas that seem to be wanting to be awake inside the human consciousness. One is the biological body. The other one is the electromagnetic field. And the other one is the geopathic field, which is the planet. And I can feel it. And that would have been our original nature of our original design, would be the ability to be the consciousness of matter and energy, of matter and energy, basically, and where they meet, because electromagnetic is where they meet. So the 3 images I got, one is the enteric nervous system, which has been around for me forever. And because it carries the pattern of the original design before you came in here. It like literally carries your original nature of your original self. And that's evidence. We have evidence for that now. And and then the movement of the vagus nerve, I'm going to get some of it transcribed because I said it so well and now it's vague. But then I could see the movement of the vagus nerve, and then I could see the spine. This was the one that made me laugh. I could see the spine. And like, if you look at the spine, there's all these nerves that come around like arms and go into the organs, but they also go into the vagus nerve. And I'm not going to say anything about the vagus nerve because it was so literal when I said it to the 2 people. I don't remember it now. So I don't want to, until I can recall it accurately, I don't want to say anything. But the part that was interesting is I burst out laughing because Kundalini, which is prana, is electromagnetic energy. No wonder. I mean, it's like, duh. And then I could see it coming up, coming into the brain, and then coming down. And I could see the amygdala, because the amygdala are, everybody talks about the amygdala are hold us in trauma. No, the amygdala says, why are you still in trauma? You should be happy. They're actually our happy gland. That's actually what they're designed for. Their design is, we're in paradise. And they just keep saying, excuse me, you're not in paradise. Why are you registering trauma? Please stop registering trauma. We're to give you link to paradise or creation. And so what you said about the mitochondria, that's more the general system. That's like the car. That's like what keeps the DNA. But these little pieces, and then there's this other little thing, which I can't remember the name of. It's so teeny. They just discovered it 40 years ago. And I can't remember what it registers, but it has something to do with registering a sense of, like registering the condition of your personality. What your personality says it's registering as a condition, like happy, sad, good, bad. And the amygdala and it work together. There's 3 little things work together. And then in these 2 prophetics, I'm like in shock because I can see the auric grid, which I see grids. I don't see just auras. I see grids. And I could see that what I call the golden grid, sort of like the center of the toroidal, that's like our sort of Merkaba body, literally wired into these aspects and run by this electromagnetic current that goes from the earth through the spine to the greater field, comes around, does it again, comes around, does it again. And it wasn't really so much the data for me as much as I'm trying not to cuss because then YouTube will take it off. But like, oh my goodness, I'm seeing it. I cannot see what's not there. I am actually seeing it in these four bodies, the activity of it. And that's what was most important for me, was that it points to something happening. And if we just keep trying not to find the truth and just try to stay present to what we're experiencing and let whatever language comes that lets us actually experience it in our mental cognitive mind, regardless of whether it maps out to other people or not, we're on our way. We just are. We just are. Oh, that was the other thing about the prophetics. All I could say, and yes, you can see my housemate. I was like a child that had found her favorite candy store. I mean, I'm so worn out at the end of prophetics. I was so enlivened by these prophetics, all of them, because I could tell that no choice. We might, like I said, we might have the rudder stuck and we might have lost the oars and we might be running into the side of the stream and getting bruised on where we hit the trees, but hell, it's going down river. Bleep. But it is going down river. And we are being evolved. We did our part. And the larger field, enough to trigger the larger fields taking over. And we don't know the rest, Deb. I don't know the rest of the story. None of us do, because anything we perceive is only best on the layer. I like that. The layer we're in now.
Wow. That is just, well, plain fun. Just plain fun. And not knowing the rest, I can really get that. So that's the aspect of what's the point that we'll never get. Well, I don't know about, at least probably not this lifetime.
We won't care about knowing. If people really look, especially people on this call, they have lost a lot of needing to know. And the only time, like in this conversation, we need to know is we're trying to get the navigation of it.
Exactly.
And we're trying to get registers to be participants.
Yes.
Like we want to participate in our own evolution. And I think the ascension model, I think there are people that do want to ascend, this wasn't their home. This wasn't where they wanted to come for vacation. This wasn't where they wanted to develop a materialized identity of immortality. But that's not me. I'm clear what land I'm playing in. And I'm fine with people, human beings, doing what their patterns are and what their process is, because some awakening is actually transcendence. Some of it is actually ascension, and that's all good. But I know I came to experience this planet and her, and how many people say how much they love nature and can't stand human beings. So there's something as an immortal we love here, and it reminds us of our greater nature, and to be fully functionally participating in it. Holy Mother, we may be on that edge. We'll see. Over the next 5 years, we'll know everything I ever saw, and you were around. When that God came to me, everything I saw come true.
Right.
And he said 2020 to 2027, and I believe him.
Yep.
Including all the stuff that's happening that he predicted, like a war in the Middle East. It's coming. Yep.
Even thinking in terms of ascension, that could even be interpreted as transcending through layers.
Yeah.
Isn't necessarily exit this planet.
That's true.
In other words, limited back then, because that was quite a while ago when I first started learning about ascension and those ideas, and that some people strongly valued that and said this is the way to go. But as you're talking, I'm just really present to the limitations of interpretation based on where we are in the process, in the transformation or transpersonal process. And you're right, we won't know in the sense of answers. That part of the layering is gone now. It's just gone. or not sustainable and viable
And,
anymore.
and highly reactivating.
Yeah. But the knowing part, there's something to be discovered about what that means now, because I'm very prone to wanting to know. I'm very prone to that. I love it. I love articulation.
And
I
think,
love how all the
yeah,
work I did in my degree program really woke me up to an ability to articulate, where before I was really stuck in nonverbal.
mhm.
I don't know if stuck in, but that was more my natural state, was the nonverbal.
The articulation and cognitive capacity are now very strongly up, because that's where that is the gift human beings have, is to bring things to word.
And that's like play for me,
Yeah.
or is an aspect of play.
Mhm.
So I just find this whole process that we're in, this process is too flat a word.
Progression.
Thank you. That's a great word. To be, it's not just fascinating, it's such a gift. And it isn't a gift, it's a participatory gift. It isn't just a gift like we passively sat here and got given something by, powers greater than ourselves, although that's an aspect of it. It's a gift, like you said, we did our part. We actively co-generated. And I marvel at that aspect of being, I guess,
Yeah.
that would know without knowing it knows, and do it anyway, be
Yeah.
it anyway.
Yes.
Amazing.
We are approaching the harvest of our shared endeavor. Yeah.
Wow.
Do you want to set up for the next call that you want to do, where you want us people to be able to come on Zoom and engage? Because we've
I,
only got 8 minutes left.
yeah, I would like to have people come on and be able to engage. I hadn't really thought about a when or anything.
Well, the question is, do you want to do this again, or do you want to wait and see? I'm because the way we had talked before is you wanted to have the session, because we couldn't set it up this time. But if we were going to set it up, we'd have to set it up this time for another time, if people wanted to come on and,
Right.
and be part of the discussion.
Well, it's actually both, because I feel called that this activity of CreateAWorld is a something. And here we go. I mean, it's happening. So, but I also feel like it's kind of got a life of its own.
Yeah.
And I'll just know, or we will know, today's
Yeah.
the day or whatever.
All right.
So I'm not sure how to do that.
That's fine. That's fine. We'll let people know. The one thing I do want to let people know, however, is I think starting in March, if I'm correct, in March, we're going to be publishing You as the Mind of Creation. And we're also going to start using CreateAWorld for at least Heather and I, and maybe Michael and Electra, to come on and actually start the conversation of metabody. And the reason Deb definitely triggered this modality of communication. And the reason CreateAWorld didn't start when I got told to start it, or when I got told to create it. So we created all the dynamics of it, but we didn't start it in time, was because new reality rises through shared engagement. It doesn't rise, it rises reality actually forms through storytelling. It actually forms through human beings coming together and saying what they're present to, saying what they're opening up into. And it's how you get articulation, and it's how you get new thinking, is in coming together to be as Deb is in the questions. And I am basically a channel. That's what I am. So I'm not like I sound sometimes that people often think I sound like a person with an opinion, but I just seem to be this gigantic observing nature with an identity and that has its own opinion and about itself. But the point is, it's a different frame than we're used to as human beings. We're used to coming on and getting information, and the Facebook Live we've been doing all this time, all of you can feel yourself really participating in the comments and then talking to each other while I'm talking. And it really is create a world does mean create a world. And it's create a world by our shared awakening in the process of a moment of time. Actually, I said that really well. And so that's what Deb's talking about too. And she says, I don't know, this thing gave us a place. CreateAWorld gave us a place. It came to me, like channeled to me, but it was to make a place in time. And just like the other things that happen in the field of Tantra Mat, for instance, it evolved. It is an evolutionary process because we've made a date with time where that evolutionary process has a place to play. Anything about that, Deb? We have
Yeah, it really just came and got me.
Yeah.
It came and got me. Do this now. I wasn't planning this from one point of view. I'm reminded of, because people may really enjoy this imagery, but back when we lived at Tintagel, which was in the 90s somewhere, I think late 90s, I don't know, something like that.
We moved in 1992 and I was recovering from cancer.
Okay, and then we lived there till what, 2006, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you would do workshops called CreateAWorld. And
God, yes.
what that looked like, which was it's so much of a living metaphor for me. So the workshop would basically be however many people came and signed up for it. And Tantra would say, go create a world and use all the furniture, whatever's there. And people would stand around like deer in headlights for a while. Then they'd understand, oh, this is the workshop. Oh, and then they'd start moving things around. We had couches upended, we had whatever, it was different every time. And it was so amazing to watch the flow of shifting from, oh, this is the workshop, oh, she means create a world, and then what it was like to work together. Even if someone was doing something on their own, it was still together. It was not isolation. All of a sudden, it was not, oh, you're doing your thing all by yourself, even though in time and space it might have looked like it, It was just this amazing thing. And then, of course, we'd put the living room back together or whatever part of the house.
The other thing about that is there was a moment everybody stopped together every single time. There was a moment everybody stopped. They all registered. We have created a world.
That's right. And it was complete. And it was beautiful, artistic, generative. I don't know if we would have used those words or had access to those words back then. I don't remember, but we did. Everyone would stop, and it was always extremely beautiful. Didn't matter how chaotic, even if someone was trying to make it chaotic or weird or whatever, it always ended up beautiful. Always.
It did. That is so amazing, Deb. I had no idea that was where this began.
Yeah.
That was actually where this began. Wow. Talk about setting the field and then having it come into existence. And what she's saying is really real, is that it'll be interesting to see us where, patterning what Deb said about a non-hierarchical realm. We don't know a non-hierarchical realm. Like I because most of my operating state was leader oriented. I can't tell you the beauty of being non-leader oriented anymore,
Mhm.
and being in the potentiality of a cohesive pattern. I've just been in this a long time, like 12,000 years. So I can have sometimes a larger conversation than other people can have. But the I of me is just another person in the field. And that's beautiful. Thank you, Deb. We will see what rises. I do know we're starting the Metabody in March, and we'll see how it goes from there. And love you all. Take precious care, and see you later.